Hi. Well, I want to talk to you about maximizing your parent involvement. So, we're going to look at Joyce Epstein's model for schools, families, and community partnerships. You'll probably find this model helpful as a great tool for supporting you in your work with parents. So, you can use the worksheet that's linked below on in to help you create part of your plan for if you're going to use this as your final project to engage and involve parents more. The reference for her work is on the last slide of this presentation if you want further information. So one of the things that we look at is the research, of course. And so what does the research say? Well, we know that just about every family that does care about their children wants them to succeed and eager to obtain better information from schools and communities so as to remain good partners in their child's education. At least it always starts that way, right? All right. So we also know the research tells us that school personnel, teachers, and administrators would like to involve families more, but many just don't know how to go about doing it. They don't know how to build positive and productive programs that involve parents. They know how to do it with not that involve parents as well. And so then sometimes they've had bad experiences, just as parents have had. And so they're fearful of trying to do that. Move the slide forward. Sorry, guys. This is tough. Okay, so that was that one. Okay. The second thing that we want to talk about the research is um, how partnerships tend to decrease grade levels. So as kids get older, parents start to withdraw in being involved in the school setting. Teachers stop asking parents to be as involved because they kind of think that kids should be becoming more independent. They got a handle on it. Kids kind of tell their parents, don't come, you don't need to know. Parents want to try to respect that as well, or the parents get busy. We find that it's interesting that more affluent communities have involvement. We find that parents are more educated in affluent communities than others, and so that they have a voice, they have a say, and they kind of have an attitude of I promote the financial well-being of that school, so therefore I have the right to have a say. Okay, which makes sense. We also know that schools that do not have affluent communities, um, they make um, more contact with families about problems and difficulties their students are having rather than talking about involvement in school, ways in which parents can support the school, can be involved in events or activities. We also see that those communities typically have a higher number of single parents and parents who are employed outside the home, that they're not as free or flexible in their schedule to come to school, and parents who live farther away from school. And not surprisingly, we find that fathers are less involved overall, whether it's affluent or not affluent, but even in the less affluent communities, we see that that's the case. But unless, and see, here's our unless, schools and teachers implement appropriate practices to build those positive partnerships with families. That means they have to have an intent. They have to intentionally go out of their way to build those practices that involve parents. So the next part is when we look at that overlap and intersection of the Epstein's model between family, school, and community. You can use this worksheet, and that's the one that's linked below, to consider how you on the 6 types of involvement that Joyce promotes in her work with families and getting them involved. So, right, you can print out this worksheet or type on it or whatever you want to do, how each of these parts of the Venn diagram might be put to good use in your work with the school and in the community involvement that you have in your school. When you start to look at this type of thing, we 6 types of involvement that Epstein says we can have parents and teachers be working together and engage together. Parenting, strictly looking at communicating, okay, and that's a large part of your program has been focused upon how do we communicate with one another as well as with families and communities. Volunteering, having parents volunteering, the learning that goes on at home, how they you can help parents support that learning, the decision making that goes on, and that collaborating with the community. Okay, so those are the 6 types of involvement that Epstein's model looks at. They ask you to go ahead and consider in the next 12 slides. We're going to go over ways in which we can promote that. We have some sample ideas, some practices, and we have some challenges and barriers that you might want to avoid in trying to do those practices. Okay. Epstein's first one, that parenting piece, the basic responsibilities of families. She says that schools need to help all families establish home environments to support children as students. That makes sense. Let's talk about some sample practices that we might use from the research that have been found to be helpful. So one is that whole home condition around a student as a child as a student. So when you look at that, you think, okay, how do we help support homework at home? We talk about a place, a spot. That doesn't mean a desk set up like at school, but it means a spot, a spot that's always clear, a spot that's always designated from a certain time to a certain time there the student can do that homework. That's an environment that supports work and learning. Workshops for parents, videotapes on how to set up or how to help in a situation where so you can send that online, that video type idea. Computerized telephone messages, many schools send those messages to parents just to remind or encourage them about parenting things, child rearing at certain ages and grade levels. Okay, most districts have that digital dialing capacity. Parent education and other courses for might be for training parents on how to support their child at school. For instance, you completed the paraeducator training, and I have teachers who tell me they use that same format, but on the website that their school has for parents. So that's kind of an interesting practice. Family support programs, making sure they know where those are for even for health, nutrition, and any other services you think the school might need parents about. Um, this is one. Next one's a tricky one. Home visits at transition points to preschool, elementary, middle, and high school. So those transition times. So in our current day, many schools discourage that home practice visit. And so perhaps we consider video or online home visits instead if this is possible. Other ways to do visits are to attend community meetings or celebrations that are going. There's often a disconnect when teachers do not live in the community where the school is and where they're employed and teach in. So a visit to the community events is one way to make that connection and show that the school personnel value the community. This attendance to school events is one of the ways parents are often judged on whether or not they value school or their child's educational experience. And so it probably goes both ways, and the research says it does. Neighborhood meetings to help parents understand schools and to help schools understand families. We have those like at the board meetings for the monthly, but not many parents feel comfortable coming into those unless they're upset about something. So the next piece that we want to look at for that parenting and basic responsibilities of families is what challenges and barriers you might want to avoid if you're going to try and help families establish that home that helps their children act and look like students. You want to provide information to all families who want it or who need it, not just the few who attend the workshops or the nightly, evening teacher-parent meetings, okay, or any other meetings. You want to enable the families to share information with schools about culture, background, their children's talents, children's needs. And it doesn't always mean a face-to-face meeting when many parents are working hard. It also doesn't always mean a written um, inventory, but it could, and that's a good idea, especially if it's a check mark where they can fill it out quickly and submit it. Uh, it seems like so often today we have access to cell phones or texting, so that might be an option as well. And make sure that all of the information for and from families is usable, um, and by all means linked to their child's success in school. Always linked back to their child's success in school. Type 2 of the 6, Epstein calls communicating. And it's really pushing the design of effective forms of school to home communication about school programs and children's progress. So it's a big deal. And right off the bat, they say one of the major ways that schools use is to have conferences with parents every year, at least once a year, and that during those conferences, super important, or during phone calls, to have language translators so families can be assisted. Making sure you're not asking a family member to be the translator. That gets real tricky because unless you're also somewhat fluent in the language, you don't know if the translation is being accurately given, and you don't know if the response back from the parent um, is being given in totality or is one that they truly understand. So that becomes a major issue, that schools truly do use language translators for that and make sure they have it. Okay, so the weekly or monthly or daily um, notebooks back and forth, and the monthly folder kids work like a portfolio is sent home and has the opportunity for parents to look at it and give their comments back or their questions back on what is going on in your classroom. Then parents to pick up like report cards with conferences on improving grades, if that's a way that your school operates and does that. Always looking at student success rather than simple improvement or simply saying do it. Um, Looking at that kind of communication and being sure that they're listening to the parents, saying this is what my student says is going on and how do we work towards success that way if that's not accurate information from your point of view. Providing clear information on choosing schools or courses that in the upper grades, and programs, and what activities are going on in your school that could be a support, and how can that join those activities and have a way home, and those types of things. And then clear information on all the school policies. And that's like in EDSE 511, many of you took that class, and we did a letter home with the introduction of the classroom specific rules and making sure that those were very clear, and the programs and any changes that were happening were clearly informing the parents of those things. The challenges and barriers to avoid in the communicating piece, of course, many of us are familiar with barriers that occur during communication with other people, and it becomes specifically important with parents. You want to review the readability, the clarity, the form of all your memos, and how often you send home your memos, all of the notices or any other print or non-print communications. You want someone looking at those, that your spelling is correct, even though that many parents might not read them. Some that read them will be highly critical of a person called a teacher who misspells or doesn't use correct form. You might consider parents who don't speak English as their first language, or don't read well at all, or maybe they need larger type. So making that accessible and knowing who your parents are, knowing who you're talking to. You want to review of major communications across the board, okay, conference schedules, any of that. And that's one way to start establishing two-way channels of communication for home to school and school to home. So really thinking about, is there a two-way communication that's ongoing? Okay. The third is having parents volunteer. This gets tricky because then you have parents in your school, perhaps, or seeing what kind of work is going on in schools if they're only supporting that kind of help. So you want to recruit and you want to organize parent help and support in a way that actually is leading to their child's success, and that they're a member of the team that's educating their child. So school and classroom volunteer programs to help teachers, administrators, students, and other parents can be set up. Research shows us that that's pretty, once parents are being treated as a member of the team, they have a much better attitude. Okay. Parent room, just, kind of like and our family center for volunteer work, meetings, resources for families. I worked at one school that talked about being the community school. Like they had it open many nights for parents to come in and play basketball with their kids, all kinds of, have meetings, have social events, and had contracts up and all of those things. So it wasn't more costly to the school, but someone had to be there, of course. Annual postcard survey, to identify um, talents and times and availability and locations of the volunteers or parents in the community, and a class parent who did the telephone tree for different kinds of communications and needed information to give those to all the families. You got a parent who really wants to be involved, and they could be a telephone person if that's the case, and making sure they understand FERPA and those kinds of privacy. And then parent patrols at other activities, like to aid in safety and operation of school programs, having them actually be part of that kind of um, activity. And then, of course, we have some challenges to having parents, volunteers, and having those people there. To recruit volunteers widely so all the families know that their time and talents are welcome. Okay. You want to make the schedules as flexible as possible for those volunteers, so when they come to assemblies or events, that you enable as many parents as want to participate. And you want to truly organize the parent work. You want to provide some kind of training. You want to talk about the privacy acts. You want to make sure they understand those. You want them to sign, they understand those, confidentiality. You want to match their time and talent with what teachers in the school overall and student needs are. And you want to recognize the efforts of these participants so that they will continue to be productive and join you in the next um, events, and continue that and tell other people, of course. Okay. Epstein's number 4, learning. So you want to help parents provide information by providing information and ideas about how to help students at home with homework and other curriculum related activities and decisions and planning for the future. So we're talking about ideas like giving parents information, families information on the skills required by a student at each grade level. Okay, and what each class requires of their reading, their writing, their abilities at that, and what supports they might need or that are supplied at school in order to be successful in that classroom. You might provide information on homework policies and how they can help monitor whether the student's doing the schoolwork at home, and discuss how they can get support if they don't know how to help their student with that schoolwork. Information on how to assist students to improve their skills at various different classes and doing school assignments, and the regular schedule of homework that comes from each class. It's important that teachers kind of send that out in either a newsletter that they send out or by email. In one of our schools, we had a great math teacher who put her assignments every week up on the school website, so that the parents could look on that and say, is my homework tonight? For parents who don't feel that they know how to support some kinds of homeworks like math and things, then there would be a contact tree of parents who could support and help. So that's always interesting too. And then a calendar activities for parents and students, that they can be involved in things that are curriculum oriented. Now, some of the challenges home that the research identifies that you want to avoid falling into is that disorganization of schedules of understanding. So you want to really design and organize a regular schedule of interactive homework that gives students the responsibility for discussing important things they're learning, but also how parents can help. You want to coordinate the family linked homework activities if students have several teachers, so we know how much homework is going home. You want to involve families and children in all of the important curriculum related decisions that are ongoing, so at least that they're informed of what's going on about curriculum at the school. So, number 5, decision making. So, you want to include parents in school decision, just like we were talking about curriculum, developing parent leaders and representatives from the school, some ideas. And at the end of this presentation, you'll see links to the PTA website that gives ideas, or other parent organizations that you might look at, or advisory councils, or you might even have a committee where parents look at different types of curricular kinds of things, and independent advocacy groups coming in rather than being having them come in when there's only trouble, but come in and talk about how that parents can advocate. So having that outside source be your team part, having district level councils or committee meetings that parents in the communities involved with, not just in times of trouble, but in good times as well. And information on school or local elections for schools representatives, not taking one side or the other, but just information on who's running, how parents can vote, what are the issues that they would be looking at for a candidate to be talking about, maybe. And network with all families through maybe having certain parent rep. And then the barriers and challenges that you want to overcome is you want to be sure that you have parent leaders from all ethnicities, socioeconomic, and any other group that you can think of that might be important in your community. So that representation. You might offer trainings that enable people who want to be leaders to serve as representatives of other families that don't have a voice. Want to give them input and that return of information from all of the families in your area. And you want to include students along with parents in that decision making spot. So, number 6, collaborating with the community. Now we move outside of the school and we move into the community. And we want to identify and integrate resources and services from the community. Even in our small Greeley community here in District 6, there are many school programs, family practices, and other agencies that are supportive of families, not just low income families, but families across the board. And I find out more and more of them all the time. So I usually use United Way. They have kind of a large database many times of all of the different organizations. So I go to United Way's database for our local community to find out if there's something that. So you want to send out information for students. You want to be aware of where to send parents if they have access to databases that they can look at for not only cultural and recreational and social and health, but any other programs that they might be looking into or services that could help families. And you want to give information on activities that link to learning skills and talents. You want to include summer programs coming up, especially when you don't have extended about students with special education needs. You want to integrate those services with partnerships that involve school, civic, counseling, culture, health, all of those things. And many times there's pro bono work or free tickets that they can access. So you want to look at those. And you really do want to have that be a service to the community by the students, the families, and the schools, and have even alumni participate programs for students so that they come back and they can talk about the importance of what they did with their educational experiences. Now, barriers to having collaboration with the community, of course, are it might involve turf problems that people think this is, especially when the resources are less than equitable across the community. Okay, so you want to solve those turf problems by having involved, have collaborative activities. If there's agencies that are doing the overlap and doing the same programs, maybe we can have parents on those committees or involved with those agencies and talk about those. You can involve families of community programs for students, such as mentoring programs, tutoring programs are out there, and business partnerships could with the school. And many parents are involved in those, and you start asking, and you want to assure the equality of opportunities for students and families to participate in those community programs or to obtain those services. So you want to make sure that everybody knows and has access to what those are involved and aren't just programs that are trying to get into your business and find out what's going on, as many families fear. You also want to match the community contributions with the schools that the school has set, and you want to integrate family services with education whenever it's possible. So those are the six areas that certainly are looked at for collaboration with families that Epstein pulled from the literature and says those are some important features of the literature. So, what are some ways that you can start as a team? And that's the important piece. So, start by sending out your newsletter, introducing yourself at the beginning of the year, making contact with those families, maybe having them complete an inventory of what the present practices yourself of those school, community, family partnerships. What are they out there? Start that inventory on your own and with your colleagues, and then say where are the gaps and what are we missing. You can use that worksheet. That you want to outline a vision of how practices of partnerships will develop over a time frame. Maybe you look at the next 3 years, and you prepare a detailed plan. It can be a 1-year plan. It can be, less than that, as you want to do the steps. And you want to evaluate where's our school, family, and community partnerships now, and what progress will we make? What will the goals be? And how are we going to measure? That's an important starting point that we want to look at. So then we come back to that whole, here's our worksheet of our Venn diagram. And we are going to look at the overlap of the educational settings, the families, and the community. And remember, for those of you who took EDSE 511, how culture was discussed as the value, the backgrounds, and the concepts and the ideas from which individuals come from, and how with one another in our school settings. Well, you'll need to keep the cultural considerations for responsiveness that we had discussed in mind as you interact with these. And you'll want to include at least the 10 cultural considerations for responsiveness that we pulled from the IRIS module and put into your major assignment for EDSE 511, that behavioral management instructional plan, or as it was often referred to, the BMIP. We want to keep those in mind as we look at the overlap and intersection of these three areas of our community. If you're looking for more ideas and more suggestions, we say that you might go to these 3 sites for sure. They're good resources. You'll find that they are very helpful in supporting parents. You may even find that the information is useful for you to provide a parent in-service training, as you did for early course. And many of your teachers have let me know later on that they use these for training for the foundation for many other trainings for teachers and parents and paraeducators. So have at it and enjoy spreading the wealth of your knowledge across the system. So I end this with, this is the reference and APA format that I vetted the support that you've watched and heard me talk about here. If you want more ideas and information, this text is still very current and the ideas are worthwhile. And as always, please let me know if you have questions for me or ideas you want to share with me. I always love hearing your ideas. Thank you for giving me your time today.